This episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast is brought to you by Cujo Yardwear, the shoe that's built like a boot but feels like a sneaker and specifically designed for yard work. They're waterproof, breathable, and lightweight. Go check them out at lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/Cujo and use coupon code LCBS10 to get 10% off your order. You're listening to the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast, the weekly show sharing proven methods and systems in marketing, equipment, and customer service, educational and motivational, to help make your lawn care business an overwhelming success. Now here's your host, Julio Tomei. Welcome, Lawn Care Nation, to another episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. I'm your host, Julio Tomei, and this is episode number 159, entitled My Lawn Application Program. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks again for joining me this week on another episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. I really appreciate you guys tuning in each and every week and downloading those episodes, and as well, of course, for the questions, the comments, the feedback, as I always say each and every episode that you guys have been sending in, especially for those podcast reviews. Again, you guys, if you haven't left a podcast review, it's a fantastic way for you guys to show your appreciation for the content that I create by going to iTunes and leaving a review. It just adds that social proof, that concrete evidence that the podcast, that the content, that the episode topics that I talk about each and every week are valuable to you guys, that they do help you guys, in building your business, and that you guys do find that value in them. And then you have people there that are going through those podcast directories. They're looking through all those different podcasts to download and listen to, and they come across mine and they see those reviews, that can really help spread the word about the podcast. The other sort of call to action that I'd like to maybe get out there for you guys is to share that you're listening to the podcast. A bunch of you guys have done this on Instagram, and that's fantastic. You've been showing photos of your, car radio with the Lawn Care Business Success, artwork from the podcast episode there showing what episode that you're listening to, and you're tagging me in those photos. And again, that is fantastic. Just getting the word out, in Facebook, in Instagram, wherever it is online that you hang out and you talk to others regarding lawn care. Just getting, the word out about the podcast and just helping me spread the message. Again, if you find value in these episodes, I would really appreciate you guys, number one, leaving a review on iTunes, and number two, spreading that message and just sharing that you're listening to the episodes. So hopefully you guys are having a fantastic summer thus far here in North America, and for you guys on the other side of the world there in Australia and New Zealand listening, hopefully you guys are having a great winter season. But here in North America, the temperatures are ramping up, and it's getting pretty, warm out there. I've seen you guys posting on Instagram about working in conditions with triple digits, hitting, getting really, really warm in the over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So just make sure you guys are looking after yourselves. Make sure that you guys are, getting hydrated. I know for me, where I'm here located on the west coast of Canada, it's not quite, those extreme temperatures, but it still is very, very warm. Just today, being out there mowing lawns all day, I just felt scorched by the sun, and I just wanted to, get home, take a shower, and just literally sit in a dark room, just away from the sun, just because of it hammering down on me. So I can only imagine what some of you guys are going through in those triple-digit type areas. So just take care of yourselves out there, guys. Make sure that hydration is on point. It's super important to keep hydrated. Make sure you've got your sunscreen on. You've got as much of your skin covered as possible. And just protect yourself from the sun and the sun's harmful UV rays. So I'm just going to play the podcast announcements, and then we're going to get into this week's episode in its entirety right after this, so stay tuned. Hey guys, if you have any questions or comments about the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/contact. For you Instagram users out there, be sure to follow me at lawncarebusinesssuccess. And if you haven't checked out my videos yet, well, what are you waiting for? Be sure to subscribe to the Lawn Care Business Success YouTube channel. Now, I know you guys love listening to audio while you work as much as I do, so I've partnered up with Audible to offer you guys a free 30-day trial and 2 free audiobooks of your choice. There's no long-term commitments, and you can cancel anytime. And get this, even if you cancel during your free trial period, you still get to keep the 2 free audiobooks. It's a great way to try the service and to see if Audible is right for you. So why not give it a try? Head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/audible. Now back to the show. Okay, so I wanted to, thinking along the lines like I talked about last week about, a lot of the questions, the comments, the feedback that have been coming through have been from people who, are just starting out in lawn care for the very first time. They have, in most cases, absolutely no business experience or prior experience with lawn care, with running a lawn care business or even working part-time for another landscaper or lawn care company, and they're just going, head on, diving right in, if you will, into the business. So I get a lot of questions from that type of person in that position. So that's why last week I talked about, the tips for mowing small types of residential type lawns, just because, like I said, a lot of the questions that I get, when I read them back, I think, that's an obvious question or an obvious answer. But for somebody who's, just getting started in the business, it may not be that obvious. When I post a picture of, say, a lawn dethatcher or a power rake, if you will, I'll always get comments on Instagram. There'll always be somebody saying, what is that? When's a good time to do whatever that is? So, it just leads me to believe, and just shows me that there's a lot of people out there that basic knowledge. And I think back to myself when I started my lawn care business, I was in the exact same position 13 years ago. The only difference was I had that network of other guys in that franchise business that I was a part of, and they had monthly meetings that we would go to and we would talk. And that gave me direct access to these other guys that have had, way more experience than me working in the business, some of them for years, and, being sort of, playing for the same team, basically all under that same franchise, company. None of these guys felt threatened. Having territories and boundaries that we worked in, like I say, nobody felt threatened, so they were all open to sharing their information, which may not be the case if you're, running into your local competition. So I think back to those same questions, like I said, that power rake question that I got when I posted a picture of a power rake, and I think back to myself, when I first started out, I had no idea about what a power rake was. So it just reminded me of that. I remember going to those monthly meetings and asking, if, I could only buy one machine, between, say, a power rake or an aerator, which one should I buy? I remember specifically asking that question to all of the other franchise franchisers that were a part of, that franchise company that I was a part of. So I think back to those types of questions that newbies, guys that are green into the industry. So I thought I would cover this week a basic primer about how or what I offer in my lawn care business as far as a lawn treatment program goes. This is, applications like fertilizer, moss control, lime, and, things like aeration, that sort of stuff, all the sort of stuff that kind of goes together that isn't directly lawn mowing. So now just a caveat here, that, as always, remember and take this information into context. Think about, my particular situation. I mow on the west coast of Canada in the Pacific Northwest. It's always, usually raining. I know a lot of you guys are probably rolling your eyes right now, as I'm describing this, because I always seem to describe this, but I just want to keep it into context. So think about this. This program, this sort of system that I am going to describe is what works for me in this situation. And if you're in a completely different area, a different part of the country, different part of the world, this may not be applicable to you, but it'll still give you an idea of, the sorts of things that I do in my business, and you can then, adjust that and find out, what applications or what sorts of things are common in your area, and sort of put maybe together a similar type model. So, that's all I'm sort of trying to achieve here, is just sharing my experience with this, what I've been doing the last few years, what's working. And, hopefully you guys can find some benefit in that. So basically, what I do, I have a pretty generic program across the board for all of my clients. And because of the, a lot of my clients are, similar size properties. There's nothing that is too massively huge. Now, I don't require that every client, gets these extras. It's always an option for me. So, the only thing that I require of any client when they're signing up with me is to do with mowing, and that is that it's a weekly service. I call it the weekly as needed mowing service, which basically means that it gets mowed every week until the summertime, where in July and August, I then go to a 2-week model, and for most clients. But for those clients who are on the fertilizer program or who are watering regularly and their lawn is still growing, then they continue on that weekly service. And that will continue through until the fall. And that's the only thing that I sort of require is just that lawn care program. And that also goes hand in hand with the fact that I only take credit cards. So they have to, pay by credit card. I don't do checks. I don't do cash. Don't do, all that stuff. It has to be credit card, has to be weekly, and if that's, what you're looking for, then I'm your guy. If it's not, then you'll have to find another lawn care company. But as far as the applications go, the fertilizers, all that sort of stuff, all that is optional. It's only there for clients that want it. Now, of course, I suggest it to all the clients, but inevitably there's always clients that are only looking for lawn mowing. They, have absolutely no desire or intention or, care in the world whether their lawn is nice and weed-free or anything like that. Now, the other thing to consider is that here in the city that I work in, there is restrictions now and bans on pesticides or herbicides. So I can't spray weeds anymore for residential lawns. And I believe that the rule now is that only multifamily dwellings like condos, apartments, those types of things are allowed to have their lawns sprayed for weeds. But for your single family residential homes, it's no longer allowed. And I may be, off on that particular because I haven't paid attention to it for the last probably 5 or 6 years now, because I gave up when they started talking about the bans. I knew, watching that surrounding cities and cities across the country were all imposing bans. I decided to not renew my license to spray weeds for lawns and that sort of stuff. So ever since my license for that sort of lapsed, I just have never sort of followed along or paid attention to that stuff because I don't deal with any of that stuff anymore. So basically, those chemical type products for killing weeds and stuff are not allowed in the city that I work in. So for my program, basically, it's all about, just stimulating the lawn, trying to get it healthy. I will use organic products like alfalfa, pellets, or your standard synthetic fertilizers as well. And generally, I will admit that the standard sort of, your standard pelletized fertilizer is the most popular sort of product. So my whole goal when I'm looking at a customer's lawn is just to get it as healthy as I can without the need for using those harmful chemicals and stuff that you would use for killing weeds and that sort of stuff. And I have been generally very successful with this. I remember taking, when I was doing that sort of spraying stuff and taking, courses to get my license, I remember the instructor, really drilling down to the class how dangerous, spraying things like Roundup and stuff really is, and how to make sure that your skin is completely covered and that your eyes, you've got safety glasses on, and that, like I said, you're covering up as much of your skin as possible. And, they talked about how fast your body, your skin can absorb those chemicals. Say if you're spraying and, some overspray, some mist, from some wind or something gets on your skin, and how fast your skin will absorb that and it'll be in your bloodstream within seconds. So it was really quite, remarkable. They really drilled down how dangerous this stuff is and how sick it can make you if you're not taking those precautions. So, I just, over the years, tried to shy away from it. I remember, once spraying the stuff before, just on my own, as a homeowner, before I got into lawn care, spraying my own lawn, wearing, like flip-flops and shorts, and, on a hot sunny day, and just, spraying some, lawn, weed killer type, product. And, I remember that same night getting really, really sick. And, in fact, around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, my wife had to call an ambulance for me because of how sick. My heart rate was dropping, my blood pressure was dropping. I looked white as a ghost. I was profusely sweating. And I remember, she was like looking at me, and I gave her the okay to call the ambulance, or the go ahead to call the ambulance. And I remember, sitting at the bottom of some stairs that led to the front door, and I could hear the ambulance in the distance coming. And this is like 3:00, in the morning type thing. And I remember the paramedic coming and checking and going, he doesn't look too good. And I remember them talking about how my blood pressure was like, dangerously low. And they put me on a stretcher, and they were wheeling me out. And I remember looking up at the stars as they're wheeling me down my driveway, and both of my kids are asleep in their bedrooms. They were toddlers at the time. And I, just remember thinking like, oh my goodness, like I'm going to die tonight. I'm not even going to see my kids ever again. That's how sick I was at that moment. But over time in the hospital, it cleared up overnight, and they never could pinpoint exactly what it was that caused me to get sick. Just over time, throughout the following hours, everything got a little bit better. But it was only years later when I was taking that course, and this instructor was drilling down on how dangerous these chemicals were, that, I made the connection, and I was like, oh my goodness, that night that I got really, really sick, that I had to call an ambulance, that was the same day I was out there spraying, your common lawn weed killer, with a hose end type sprayer, on my lawn, wearing flip-flops and shorts and, a t-shirt, nothing, no gloves or anything, like you see your standard homeowner doing all the time. And I'm, obviously have, no definitive proof, but it was like that. To me, it was like, that's it. Like, I'm not touching that stuff ever again. Like, it's just, that stuff is just so nasty. And so I decided at the time, because with the bans coming in and all that stuff, that I was like, forget it, I'm not touching that stuff. So that was just a personal choice for me, that no one's lawn was worth my health. So I decided, I'm just going to take a proactive approach. And those instructors also, drilled down how, a lot of things like broadleaf weeds, dandelions, for example, will only grow in compacted soil. So this is an instructor telling you and teaching you so that you can pass an exam to get your license to spray weeds. And they're telling you, in a lot of cases, you don't even need to spray anything. And they gave the example of broadleaf weeds and dandelions, and saying, hey, a broadleaf weed and dandelion will only grow in compacted soil. So aerate it regularly, and you won't have broadleaf weeds growing anymore. It'll take a bit longer. It could take a few years of regular aerating to get to that point, but you can do that safely without the need of worrying about pets and kids and all that sort of stuff. So I just took that to heart. Another thing that they said was, that's common here where I live, is clover. And saying, clover is just a sign of low nitrogen. And, that clover is nitrogen fixing. So if you fertilize your lawn properly and give the lawn the nitrogen that it needs on a regular basis, it will discourage the growth of clover, because there's no natural need for it in the lawn for it to germinate, because there's enough nitrogen in the soil. So I just took all of this advice from these instructors who obviously had a lot more knowledge and experience than I did at the time. And, I took it to heart and just ran with it. And this is basically sort of the system that I have used over the years. And I've given the example on past podcast episodes where, this once I had a customer where at first he was the type of customer that would call me to mow the lawn. Never wanted me to be on a regular sort of basis, just wanted to call me when he needed the lawn mowed. And this is, of course, early on when I was starting my business. So, of course, I was accepting customers like this because, I wanted clients. I had no business. I was just trying to build up. And then, over a few months, I convinced him to, hey, you might as well let me come on a regular basis and mow your lawn. You've got this beautiful upscale home. It's a corner lot. It's like, sort of the jewel of the neighborhood, yet your lawn is being left neglected, and you only want it cut when you're, wanting to call me to cut it. Eventually, he, agreed and let me come, set up a date on a regular schedule, and I started to cut it every week. The same thing happened with the aerating. Once I started cutting it, he asked me about aerating. I said, sure, I can aerate it. I aerated it. Come the fall, because here we generally aerate twice a year. I, told him that it was time to aerate again. He didn't want it. Then the next spring rolled around, and, I reminded him about aerating. He's like, didn't we do that last year? And, it sort of was this back and forth, where he would want it, then he didn't want it. Eventually, he just told me, after a year or two, I think, of mowing this lawn, and he just wasn't happy with the results. So he finally caved in, and he basically said, you know what? Do what you think needs to be done. The aerating, the fertilizing, all that sort of stuff. Just do it on a regular basis, however you see need fit. Like, don't go crazy though. Don't be doing stuff and billing my credit card for stuff I don't need. And I said, of course I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do what I do for all the other clients. And I did it that first year. I continued the second year, and ironically, on the third year doing it, I remember going out there and mowing the lawn, and he literally tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around and, turned the mower blades off. And he said to me, now I get why, you should aerate every year. He says, ever since you've taken over the lawn, it's been a complete transformation. And I said, literally, I think I said something like, see, like, I told you so. I know it kind of seems like, I'm a used car salesman or something, and I'm just trying to sell you a bunch of stuff you don't need, but, it's just common sense. This is the basic steps that you need to make a lawn healthy. And continue on like this, and, the lawn just gets better and better and better over time. So basically, this is sort of the plan that I built, upon that, and it's worked fantastically ever since. So basically, what I do is in the spring, my package, and like I said, it's pretty basic, but it's the same for everybody. I don't just do, like, if one customer just wants fertilizing and then another customer just wants the aerating, it's always in a package. It's everything. So, it's 4 fertilizers per year. And it's 2 limings per year and 2 aerations per year. And that's basically it. So basically in the spring, I start off, the beginning of the season after I've done the first, mow, maybe the second mow, 2 weeks later. Just in that beginning, that first month of mowing, after that first mows are done and, sort of the winter tall grass and all that stuff is sort of cut down, then I will go back and I will, put a, moss control fertilizer down. I use a 936 fertilizer that has, I believe it's 13.5% iron in it, or iron sulfate to kill, or to control the moss. So because we get so much rain here, moss buildup is inevitable year after year after year. It is a constant challenge. So putting that moss control down, is my first step, when I am, usually it's within that first visit, the first mow of the year. I will mow the lawn and put that moss control fertilizer down. Now, the nice thing here is you can get a moss control that's a liquid spray or the pelletized version. I use the pellet version. The moss control basically is just an iron dust, and it requires a carrier or something to be able to be thrown onto the lawn. So I've seen some products where it's crushed gravel, very fine crushed gravel that's coated in the dust, and you basically are putting gravel in your fertilizer spreader and throwing that out, and it's all just coated in the iron dust. Or there's these fertilizer products that are like a 936 fertilizer that has that same iron dust in it, and you're getting sort of a twofold action. You're getting the fertilizer and the iron there. And so I always use that because I just find it's way better. It kickstarts the lawn, gets the growth started nice in the spring, and that moss control product will control the moss, but it'll also really green up the lawn. It will make a lawn super green. Now, this was another tip that those same instructors from that course told me. And they even said, if you have a lawn, say that, somebody's going to have a big family barbecue, or they're having a backyard wedding or something like that. He said, put iron on that lawn, a couple of weeks before, and that'll be the greenest, healthiest looking lawn you've ever seen. It'll just be fantastic. Now, the caveat here, of course, is, you don't want to be doing this if, of course, the lawn is full of moss, because, of course, the iron will kill the moss and the moss will turn all brown and black. And, of course, that doesn't look pretty. But on a healthy lawn, or a lawn that's already been, the moss problem taken care of, adding that iron just greens up the lawn like there's no end. Now, the moss control product that I use is the single most requested product that I use. Every time I put that on people's lawns, every spring, I always get compliments on how nice it makes the lawn look. And I also, when I go to requote people, or I'm talking about, the next season, they're always like, whatever you do, just make sure you put whatever that was that you put on the lawn in the spring, because the lawn looked fantastic. And I always get, I'll get customers telling me about how, neighbors in the evening going for walks always compliment them on how nice their lawn looks. And it's always because that moss control, it just puts it up over the edge and just makes it look fantastic. If you've got a neighbor that, what's the lawn care nut on YouTube always say, you want to, dominate your neighbor with your lawn, put iron on your lawn, iron sulfate, and that stuff will turn that lawn so green that it just looks fantastic. So that's my first step when I do that. Now, generally, I will leave that until the next month. So that'll be like in March. I put the first cut, put the moss control product on. Then the next month, because I am using the moss to treat the iron to treat moss, you can't put moss control and lime down at the same time. They will counteract each other. Basically, you get, no result when you put them too close together. So I start off with that moss control. For the lawns that need power raking and all that stuff, then we can go ahead and do that. But for the majority of everybody else, then the next month I will return. So generally when I say next month, it's usually a few weeks later, because I'm not cutting at the beginning of March. It's usually mid-March that first cut would happen with moss control. And then, that first or second week of April, then I'm going back and I'm, after I do, that week's cut, I will do the aeration for the year, and then I'll also put the lime down, and then I'll put a standard pelletized fertilizer down, maybe like a 23 3.6 or something like that. Whatever the my supplier has at the time for that specific region, whatever formula they've come up with at the time. Now I don't go to like Home Depot or anything like that and buy, say, off the shelf like Scott's brand fertilizers or anything like that. I go to an actual fertilizer supplier so that they have products for all different regions of the country. They've got products for the specific times. So I just get whatever it is that they recommend at the time for the lawns that I'm servicing in that area. So the product, changes slightly, throughout the year. Also with the seed, same thing like that. If I'm seeding and stuff, they've got so many different blends of different types of seed, blends for the specific area, that I am working. And I find that if you just buy, seed off the store shelf, that, there's just so many different growing regions and areas, all across North America, that if you buy some sort of generic seed, a lot of times just doesn't do well in the area. So by going to an actual seed supplier, they know exactly what our conditions are and what the best product is to use. So generally after that second fertilizer of the year and that aeration, that lime, I will then go 2 months. So the next month after I put that fertilizer down, so that's like April, I'm putting that fertilizer. Then May gets nothing. Then June, I go back and now I'm just fertilizing. So I'm just putting down, again, a fertilizer product, whatever it is that seed supplier is recommending to me at the time for that specific area, for that region. So I'm putting that down for everybody. So then at this time, temperatures are starting to ramp up, starting to get warmer, and the rain is also starting to subside, and we'll start getting into, drought-like conditions towards the end of June. Traditionally, most years. This year was a little bit different. We've had a little bit more rain than usual, but the drought will usually hit, and then we have July, August, where it's just scorching hot, and little to no rain. So for July and August, I do nothing, no fertilizer or anything, because I don't want to burn the lawn. And obviously, I think I've explained here as well that because we get so much rain, most people do not have irrigation systems, and it requires, people putting sort of their sprinklers out there and having to water the lawn. And now with watering restrictions, only allowing watering from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., most people don't bother going to buy timers or anything like that. So that means they would, need to get out of bed to turn on their sprinklers. And as you can imagine, most people don't do that. So I don't bother doing any fertilizers in July and August because the conditions are just too dry. Without water, that fertilizer is not doing anything, so I don't even bother. And that June one will carry those lawns. It'll start to slow down a bit, but generally, if those people are watering the lawns, then it's not too bad. September hits, and I then, because I think I've talked about before how, kids are back in school. A lot of people are, coming back from their vacations and going back into work mode and all that sort of stuff. And for me, the temperature is going to start changing. The rain is going to start back. And I want to get back to mowing weekly as quickly as possible, even though I start mowing right away anyways, that first week of September, on a weekly basis. I want, obviously, to justify that as well. So that first week of September, it's now been, 2.5 months since that last fertilizer. I do that first cut in September, and bam, I hit it with fertilizer again now, because now I know putting fertilizer down in September, I know the rain is gonna, come. If it's not the first week of September, by the second week of September, there's gonna be at least one day of rain or so hitting. So I hit it with fertilizer, and that's going to carry the lawn through September and through to the end of October for 2 months. So generally I'm fertilizing every 2 months there. So that carries me through. And again, just using whatever it is as far as, the type of fertilizer supplier is recommending at the time. I believe triple 18 at that time. Could be, I think it's a slow release, 50% slow release, triple 18 for the September one. I could be mistaken though, just going off of memory, but either way, like I said, I just use whatever they're recommending at the time. It's very important, find a supplier, a fertilizer supplier, seed supplier, build a relationship with them, because like I say, they are versed in this stuff. This is what they, especially being specific to your region, they will steer you in the right direction as far as what to use. And I'm not too worried as far as this podcast goes, about getting the numbers right of the type of fertilizer and all that stuff, because like I said, this podcast is listened to all over the world, and what I use isn't going to be what everybody else needs to use. Every region is completely different. So I'm not too worried about that. Just make sure you find out what it is that you need for the region that you're working in, for the type of lawn species that it is in your area. Now, like I said, that last fertilizer there in September, that'll take me through till October. The season here is basically that mid-March until the end of October traditionally. For 13 years I've been in business mowing, and I would say 10 of the 13 years, by the end of October, Halloween, that's it. That last week of October is stretching it as far as mowing goes. Usually everything is already going dormant. Although the last couple of years, last 2 years in a row, it has gone through to December. Last year, I can't remember if it went all the way I think it may have gone through mid-November, but the year before that, it definitely went through to December, because I remember mowing still. My last mow was the last week of December. First week of December is when I was doing my last sort of application step, because I was mowing the last week of November still. But traditionally, it's the last week of October for me for mowing, and then I would go back first week of November, and I'm doing the last application. So I'm putting down a winter fertilizer. I'm doing the lime once again, and I am aerating once again. So the lime and the aeration is twice a year. So on that, if you remember back, talking about after that first moss control fertilizer in March, that second month, I was going and I was putting lime down, and I use Dolapril lime. So it's the brown pelletized lime, and then the fertilizer product in that second month. And then back here in at the end of the year, because we get so much rain here, the ground is just basically leached of all of its nutrients and stuff throughout the year, and that's why I lime it twice a year. And I've just found that that's just really helped with results. I remember them too, those instructors saying that if you don't lime, at least for the region that I live in, I know a lot of places don't use lime. It isn't necessary. It's, completely different soil conditions. But for here, I remember them saying that, if you're not liming and you just fertilize, that you're probably only getting about 50% of the benefits of that fertilizer by not liming and adjusting that pH to where it needs to be. So, I always make sure that I lime twice a year, as well as doing the aeration twice a year. Now, these were recommendations. There is a famous, famous as can be as far as gardening goes, but there's like a local radio program that would have a gardener on who owns a botanical garden in the area, like a tourist type thing where you can go and see all these fancy plants and all this stuff. So he was on years ago and recommended that for the region that I live in, because of the rain, that aeration should be done twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. And basically the fall is just to help with all the drainage throughout the winter because of the constant rain. And all that rain is just compacting the soil all the time. And also the lime. He said to lime twice a year. Again, in the spring, in the fall. Do it at the same time that you're doing those aerations. So that's why I followed that, because it was backed by, basically a famous gardener that everybody knew his name or had heard of his name in the area, and I could always reference him as factual, information of what he said and what he recommends, and he was like the trusted source in the area, so. It made it very easy sell to do, the aerations twice a year and liming twice a year with those fertilizers throughout. And like I said, this is the same package program I've been doing for every customer for years. I know a lot of companies, like the bigger, companies will have different packages, maybe a bronze package, a silver package, a gold package. I don't do any of that. It's just, it's the same for everybody. Here's what you get. You're going to get, the absolute maximum. The only thing I don't do is any of those weed killers or anything like that. If a client wants, is adamant about putting some sort of weed killer down, then they just have to do it themselves, basically. And I say, it's banned in the city, but it's still available in other cities, because not every city around here or other, suburbs and stuff have the ban. So it's available at the stores in those suburbs. You can always, just drive over there, pick some up, and spray the lawn yourself if that's something that you really want. But I don't recommend it, and I haven't had too many customers that have ever done that. I think one or two throughout the years have gone out and sprayed the lawns themselves. But everybody else just sort of trusts in, the system and me doing sort of the proactive and knowing that it's the long game, because generally most customers have either kids or they have pets, and when you talk about the thing, they're not willing to take the chance of spraying the stuff and having to keep their pets off the lawn or all that sort of stuff. It's just generally easier. Just let's go the other way and sort of be proactive with the aerating and all that to sort of prevent the weeds, those broadleaf weeds and stuff. And like I said, it takes a few years before you get to that point. But and I'm not going to say it's going to be 100% weed free, but even in my own lawn, when I look at my own lawn, doing that same thing, aerating it twice a year, just doing fertilizer, just doing liming, and not putting any weed control down on my own lawn, it's generally weed free. Is it 100% weed free? No, but I can tell you that I could probably walk the lawn and maybe find 1, 2, maybe 3 weeds, where, and it's like literally, well, just pull them out and now you're weed free. For a couple weeks, or, and then you might find another one pop up a couple weeks later or something like that. So it's not, crazy, but just by following those steps, and, doing it that way, like I said, I found, a ton of success, with that. And generally, I have customers that I don't mow, and that all I do is this program, where I just go and aerate the twice a year, the liming, the fertilizing, doing everything that I just explained. And I have a few of these clients where I've been doing this same system for going on 6 or 7 years now, year after year, and they keep hiring me year after year after year to do this, because it gets the results that they want. And they always tell me how nice the lawn looks and how many compliments they get from people. And I'm not even mowing it. It's them doing the mowing, but I'm just making sure that it stays green and, keeping the weeds at bay naturally by doing those sorts of things. So I just wanted to sort of share my sort of system on my application program of what I do for my own clients, what I've been doing for the last few years, and hopefully that will help some of you guys out that are just starting out to sort of put together and sort of take the mystery out of those sorts of things. Now, as far as pricing goes, for those packages, unless the lawns are specifically, completely, different size. Like I said, generally, most of my lawns are all in sort of a specific range. So to keep things simple, I just have sort of flat rate pricing for these things. And I don't do a package price. Because I find that, the package price is a bit more difficult. If I were to put the prices together for 2 aerations, 2 limings, all those fertilizers, it would be pretty a larger looking number versus some of these large national companies that come around and just do that sort of stuff and give volume discounts and discounts for paying up front and all that sort of stuff. So I don't give a package price. I just tell them what the price is per application. So it costs this much per fertilizer. It's going to cost this much to aerate your lawn. It's going to cost this much to lime your lawn. And generally, I said the package consists of aerating it twice. So, when I break down a quote, it'll say, fertilizer is this much times 4 times per year. Aeration is this much times 2 times per year. Aeration or liming is this much times twice per year. It just breaks it up simpler, and they see that it's, not this one big lump sum payment that they have to do up front, that it's just broken up into those months that those things would, be required. So that first month, they're getting just 1 aeration added onto their mowing bills for that month. And then that next month, they're getting, it's generally the bigger bill where they get their mowing, but they're also getting an aeration, a lime, and a fertilizer added to that bill. And then, the next month, they're not getting anything except for mowing. Then the month after that, or 2 months after that, after the summer comes back, then they're getting another fertilizer, and then, so on and so forth. So it's easy for them to figure out, and it's broken up into smaller, more affordable, prices versus, that sort of thing. Now, for my own sort of sanity and to make things easier, I have just basically a flat rate price for all of those things. And like I said, generally, unless the lawn is absolutely massive or absolutely tiny, will I deviate from those prices? So, like I think I've talked about before, how my average, price for aerating is $75. So, 99% of the lawns I do fall under that $75 for aerating price. But there are a few of these like shoebox homes that I've talked about in past episodes where, it's tiny. It takes me 10 minutes to mow, and $75 would be, just way too much to charge for aerating, and I just wouldn't feel right about doing that. So I will maybe do those for $50 to aerate those types of lawns, because I'm still dragging out this big heavy machine and all that sort of stuff, but at least it gives them a bit of a discount. Same with the liming and the fertilizer. They're just so small that I can't justify my sort of regular pricing for that sort of stuff. And again, on the other side, if the lawn is massive, $75 may not cut it for aerating. So there's, that small percentage where those prices deviate. But generally, whether a lawn is, 6,000 square feet or 8,000 square feet, it doesn't, much change it too much. You are using a bit more product as far as the fertilizer and stuff goes, but it's not like crazy amounts. So I generally keep the pricing all the same just to keep it simple for myself. So, that's it for this one, guys. Hopefully you guys found some value from it. And like I said, hopefully it just takes the mystery out of that for you guys just starting out. And you can sort of use it as a guideline to build your own, lawn application sort of program for your own clients. So that's it for this one, guys. Here's to wishing you guys all overwhelming success and freedom in your lawn care business. Bye for now.